Hi there, this is Solituron from Solituron Films, and welcome to another random review. And today's random review is the 2011 docudrama Dreams of a Life. I hope you've all had an enjoyable evening, because I'm now going to depress you. This is a film directed by Carol Morley, who's a British filmmaker who's had a couple of features since. It's available on Dogwoof DVD, and it has really nice extras, including an interview with Carol Morley and Kevin MacDonald. And this is a film about a news story that happened in 2006 about a young woman called Joyce Vincent, who at age 38 was found dead in her flat, and it was discovered that she had died in 2003. So essentially she was dead in her flat for 3 years before she was discovered. She had rent arrears of £2,500. She had pretty much melted into the carpet. They identified her through dental records, pretty much comparing the dental records to a photo of her on holiday smiling. That was the only way they could actually identify her. The television was still on. There were Christmas presents around her. She had essentially lain down on the carpet leaning against a couch, and that was where she was found 3 years after she died. So this news story caught the eye of Carol Morley, and there was also an MP who got involved as far as how could this happen? How could somebody be lying dead in their flat for 3 years without being discovered? So the film crew sent out, put in ads in papers, sent out flyers to find people who knew Joyce Vincent. So this film tries to piece together why this seemingly bubbly, attractive, vivacious young woman would end up dying in such a sad and lonely fashion. So we have reconstructions of dreams of her life. She's played by Zaye Ashton, and there's also scenes from her childhood recreated by people who knew her. So there's vox pops of people from her school, people who she worked with, and there's two of her ex-boyfriends, a guy called Martin and a guy called Alistair. And it tries to piece together fragments of this woman's life, and it does it through these reconstructions, there's also kind of reconstructed scenes of the crime scene and news reports and the usual kind of pegboard with all the little pins of all the little details of her life. It's a heartbreaking film. It's quite hard to watch in places, but it might not resonate for people who have large circles of friends, family, who kind of live social lives. But certainly for me, because obviously I am a solitary Ronin, the clue is in the name. I've often thought of, if I die, how long before my body's discovered. But maybe that's just me. I just tend to think about these things. So this film certainly resonates with me. And obviously it's a kind of cliche about, how we have become a society that doesn't look after each other. Obviously issues of mental health and the disenfranchised people, the people that fall between the cracks. And this kind of highlights this. And it also is a film really about how the public persona that you project to your friends and your co-workers is obviously different from your private persona when you close the door. So we learn about her childhood, how her mother died when she was 11, how her father perhaps wasn't the best father in the world. There's kind of a suggestion that she may have had a history of abuse, or near the end of her life she was maybe in abusive relationships. But it's mainly about how somebody who was really attractive, was bubbly, was friendly, was always around people, can end up melting into her carpet. You could argue that some of the reconstructions, because again it's really guesswork and supposition, some of them are more effective than others, but it's really the kind of testimony of the people that knew her, who were friendly with her, but then just lost touch over the years. So there's kind of people who knew her from school, people who knew her when she was in her 20s, and even at that time she didn't seem to have her own friends. She had 4 sisters, believe it or not, but again they never were really part of her life to the people that knew her. She did move around London a lot. Yeah, I should have said she died in London. But she moved around London a lot. But really the focus is kind of 2 groups of people. Martin, who was her ex-boyfriend, or one of her ex-boyfriends, and his group of friends, and Alistair, who was a music producer that at one time, she sang a little bit, and she even met Gil Scott-Heron, and she had a telephone call with Isaac Hayes. Obviously we've all had telephone calls with Isaac Hayes now and again, and it's just the perception of what she was to the people that kind of knew her. But then people drift apart, and then they didn't hear from her again. but nobody kind of, she left one place of work, but nobody ever phoned her to say, hey, how you getting on or whatever. You really feel for Martin, who you get the feeling that Joyce was the love of his life, but he never kind of got round to asking her to marry him. And he's such a jolly little fellow, and he's always got a smile until near the end of the film, where it kind of gets a bit much, as he talks about how he thinks about her all the time, and even at night he has conversations with her in his head. It's not an easy watch. It's not an easy watch, but you should watch it, because it's a really good film, and very much like the subject matter, it's kind of, it needs not to be forgotten about. And obviously the moral of the story is, if you've got a friend that you haven't really heard from for a wee while, maybe you should drop them an email or give them a ring. The final scenes are really quite moving, and certainly the last scene is quite haunting. At one point, after apartheid had ended and Nelson Mandela was doing his tour, he was in London, and through Alistair, who's a music producer, like I said, Joyce Vincent was actually in the room when Nelson Mandela was given this speech. So she actually met Nelson Mandela, bizarrely, and the final, there's three final scenes that are moving and profound and quite haunting. One is Martin breaking down under all this guilt and all these memories being dredged up to him. The next one is a reconstruction featuring Zaye Ashton of her wrapping the Christmas presents and essentially lying down in the position that Joyce Vincent was found in. And the last scene is slow motion CCTV of the real Joyce Vincent and the Nelson Mandela talk. And I won't give away what actually happens in the last scene, but it is quite powerful. So it's not a film you're going to watch a lot, and if you do, there's maybe something wrong with you. But it is a film that needs not to be forgotten, very much like the subject of the film. Because again, there will be just more and more cases of this happening in bigger and bigger cities where people are just forgotten about and left to die for 3 years before they're discovered. Yes, the phrase melting into the carpet isn't very nice. And even more depressingly, shortly before she was presumed to have died, she had a peptic ulcer, and at the hospital she had it treated for next of kin, she wrote, bank manager. So here's a woman with 4 sisters, apparently all these friends, and she wrote Bank Manager for her next of kin. Yep. So thanks very much for watching this very cheerful random review. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen Dreams of a Life, or if you would like to see Dreams of a Life. And hopefully we'll see you again for another random review that might not be quite as depressing. So thank you very much for watching. This is the Solitary Ronin saying farewell.